Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Aliens and UFOs video. Alright, another entry here based on one of your suggestions. This one having to do with a past suggestion, probably about a year or so ago. And this one, very fascinating, very interesting case, because not only does it have to do with yet another alien/UFO abduction case, but also it involves multiple occurrences within the same person, and in this case, there's several items where he was also under hypnosis providing this information, and then also using truth serum as well. So when it comes to showing, I guess, the closest thing to proof with regards to him saying these things and people doubting him, you have these two circumstances that he used to his advantage to make sure that people absolutely believed him. But yes, very fascinating, lots of info. I was debating about whether I wanted to split this into two videos because of so much info, but I thought no, I'll just do it into one, so that way I'll point out the most concise, precise information rather than, let's say, spread it out over two, make it easier for everybody. But if you wanted to, the info is out there if you wanted to get a more detailed look, absolutely. But it has to do with this, the alien abduction case known as the Pier Fortunato Zanfretta alien encounter. So lots of good info to share. Let's go ahead and we'll talk about that here. So who was this Pier Zanfretta? Well, he was a security guard that at that time, the first instance of his abduction occurred on December 6, 1978. He was just barely 26 years old. He was a security guard slash night watchman. It was his job to patrol various parts of the village of Torriglia there in Italy. By the way, this case is now also known as the most famous alien abduction case in Italy because of all the prominence that came in afterward. So there he was, just doing his nightly rounds, and then he came across one of his clients' home, a guy by the name of Dr. Ettore Riggi, I believe that's how his name is said, and he was just doing his normal routines. But he noticed one thing that stood out right. There were these four lights moving around the garden of the client's home. So naturally, because he's a security night watchman and thinking that there was going to be some intruders within that property, he decided to go investigate. He sneaked up on the location, went to the back area, went to the garden area, and as he did so, he was about to get, I guess, what he considered the advantage on these would-be burglars, when to the shock of his life, he felt something touch his shoulder. He spun around, and when he did so, he saw this. You're looking at a drawing of it here. This is unlike any of the other aliens, grays, whatever is the case that we've talked about in past videos. No, in this case, you can see there's a huge, clear difference. For starters, this thing that he saw was very large, about 10 feet tall or so, minimum. Very, very large, very prominent stance to it. Like, unlike, let's say, the smaller grays that that you and I always talked about in past videos. He also described it as having what could be listed as some kind of loose gray tunic. Also, that this was something that was hairy, had greenish skin, had these weird points, sharp angular points protruding from the side of its face. Its fingertips ended in some kind of rounded shape. And then with regards to its eyes, it had these monstrous yellow triangular eyes. Keep in mind, he's mentioning all this while first seeing this being for the first time. He also was able to describe further details because of his further encounters with these beings. And then also he saw these red veins come across its forehead. So yes, very, very unusual, very particular alien encountered in this case. Also, it had some kind of device that was attached to it, which he surmised and later stated under hypnosis was told that it had to do with the alien's ability to breathe our oxygen. So much like on our case, like we can't breathe certain other gases, in this case, this alien, same scenario, had to have this device on its mouth to do so. Of course, he was so shocked that he immediately dropped his flashlight, started running as quick as he could back to his car. That's when he stated that there was this bright light that came out. It started trailing him, like almost looming up behind him. Like, think of your average serial killer slasher movie where the villain is slowly but surely coming up behind him. Think of it that way, but instead of brilliant white light. And then just when he saw that this light was upon him, he noticed that there was this massive, gigantic UFO, larger than the home itself of the client that he was taking care of. It came out from the ground, ended with some kind of hiss, and that's when the light hit him. The way he described it was a very bright light, but with a searing wave of heat. Keep in mind that during this time period there in that town in Italy, it was very cold. Like, not, I don't think it was like snowy cold, but it was still very cold, especially at night. But here, this light was blasting him with a searing wave of heat. This is important because later on, when he was found, there were remnants of this searing heat on him and on his area too. But yes, right when this was happening, he communicated with, I guess, his boss at his security company, telling them that there was something going on. The way he described it was something was assaulting him. His boss asked what it was, and then he said, "No, they aren't men. They aren't men. My God, are they ugly?" And then that's when the communication broke off. So clearly, at this point, the boss there at the security office wanted to make sure that everything was all right. They sent 2 patrolmen to go check on that location, and when they came up, they saw, and this was about an hour later after this time period, because the initial encounter that this guy Fortunato had with the alien was about midnight. So now it's about 1:15 in the morning. These 2 watchmen came up. They found him, but they found him in a state of like complete shock almost. There he was, huddled in some area, eyes completely bulging, his pistol and flashlight just aiming nowhere. And then when he saw these 2 patrolmen come up, then he started pointing the gun straight to them. They tackled him because they realized that where the condition that he was going to be a danger to them. So they rushed him, tackled him, and they were able to get him to a place where he felt he was more safe. But that's where they noted how warm his clothes were. Remember that bright light I was mentioning earlier? His clothes were completely warm, almost hot, and then so was the area around him too. Like the area, even though it was very, very cold outside, the area that he was found, it was considered to be also very hot too. They also noted that there were these 2 distinct marks close to the back of the area of the home. I think they were like these imprints, like almost boot-like imprints. In some cases, and they found very, very large 3 immense imprints also towards the back, but they surmised, based on what he was telling him afterward, that these must have been from the UFO's quote-unquote landing gear. These imprints measured 9 feet in diameter each, and they were in the shape of a horseshoe. So crazy stuff. Too bad it doesn't seem like there might have been too many pictures or any picture of this, but otherwise that's what they reported they saw when they came up to him. So they took him back to the location. Somewhere along the way, word got out about what he encountered, and then that's when things took a different turn. All of a sudden, reporters from everywhere started to come along. Television interviewers started to come along. They wanted to find out what had occurred. This guy Fortunato, he did not want any of this publicity. That's what stood out when I was reading this information. Like, he was not someone that was there, this guy Pier Zanfretta, to be able to like gain some kind of monetary advantage. Like, from his standpoint, he was a husband, he was a father, he had a steady job. He didn't want anything that would jeopardize his job, because that's the last thing that he needed. And his job, no doubt, they didn't want that either. Like, they didn't want this publicity to affect their job too. So he tried to keep things as quiet as possible, but it couldn't help it. Like, the journalists started to think that he was someone that was making up false claims. They took things to a more sensational level, all to sell papers. And so, under the advice of someone else, I believe it was a journalist that actually took him seriously, a reporter by the name of Reno Di Stefano, that's when he told him, hey, you should get your word out and make sure that people believe you, so that way your dignity, or whatever is the case, is kept intact if he wants to protect his job, his family, whatever. And so he was able to let him agree to go under hypnosis. And that happened, I believe it was December 23rd, 1978. This was a session that was held, and under hypnosis, that's when he revealed yet another thing. He wasn't just hit with the light and then left as is. It turns out that this light actually took him to inside the UFO. That's when he noticed that he saw these beings. They were speaking to him in a way. They used some kind of device to translate what their language was to him. They stated that almost like he was not interrogated, but he was obviously held against his will. while this was happening, they stated to him that they came from a planet called Titonia and that it was located by a third galaxy of some kind. And then there, they stated that they wanted to talk with humans, but not now. They would return sometime later on and in much larger numbers. So when that would happen, who knows? They didn't give any specific information for that, but that's what at least they told him. And then if you think that that was over, if you think that that's the final part of his story, unfortunately not. Just 3 days later, that's when this guy Zanfretta encountered yet again his second abduction. So brand new abduction. There he was back on the patrol part of his routine in his patrol car going towards some tunnel when he lost control of his vehicle. He radioed it immediately, telling him that this car was now driving on itself. Keep in mind that, you know, this was back in the 70s. Like, this was not self-driving cars obviously were not back then, but this car was driving on its own. And then when he emerged from the tunnel, there was nothing he could do, as there was some kind of another light. So another white light hit the car, and then he was just able to radio in, telling them the car stopped. Again, he was talking to his boss. There was a bright light. He's trying to get out. And then that was it. He was found about an hour later again, because more security cars from the company were dispatched, and they found him yet again in a state of some kind of complete shock. His clothes were again completely warm, completely dry, even though it was drizzling outside. Even the car itself, those guardsmen noted that it was completely hot both on the outside and on the inside, which again wouldn't make sense because this was a time period where it was nighttime, it was cold, and it was raining, and yet they found everything to be as quote-unquote hot as an oven. So at this point, there was an official investigation started by the military police. Can you believe it? It went to several levels. It was forwarded to some magistrate, some court. Finally, it went to another magistrate, Russo, I believe the name was, and they certified this as no, quote-unquote no crime committed, and then that was it. That was their official, I guess, investigation into this. Like they described as bizarre events, but nothing in terms of anything concrete. So from a government standpoint, that's the closest that it occurred. But if you think that that's over, then you're wrong again, because yet again he was abducted a couple of, I think it was days later, something along those. No, I'm sorry. It was another year or so, because this was in 1979. He was patrolling within, in this case, a motorcycle route, and then that's when he noticed that something else was happening, and he vanished. I guess he was radioing in the information yet again, but this occurred. This happened one more time, second time, and I think a third time as well. Each time, separate instances where he was doing his patrol rounds, always trying to make sure that he was on guard, but then these aliens just kept coming back to him. And each time that occurred, I believe it was once or twice, he was also put under hypnosis again to try to make sure that he could recite and explain what happened. Know that this stuff was being recorded to make absolutely certain that he would in turn hear it and then realize, oh my goodness, this is what was happening on there. And one of those instances too, he was actually placed to provide further proof under a injection of sodium pentothal, which is considered the truth serum. I don't know 100% how absolutely true this is, but apparently the claim is if you get this truth serum injected in you, then the way the professor that injected it stated, he said no human being can knowingly lie while he is under the pentothal treatment. And so under that same information, he was able to again state that he was driving a car, and then that's when the bright light came up yet again, and then that's when they found him. One of these encounters also kind of impacted 4 other patrol cars because they saw a bright light as well, illuminating some of the areas as well. So also what added more corroboration was the fact that in some of those encounters, 60 other people claimed to have seen this same light from a distance. So even though it was just impacting him personally, he did have other witnesses that saw this UFO and the light from an instance as well. And one last thing to point out with regards to his case, he was even visited by the so-called grinning man. If you recall, one of my earliest videos on the cryptid side happened to do with the grinning man. I'll include the link for it below, one of my popular videos, lots of views on it too. But yes, one of his most bizarre instances, he said that he was at a gas station just filling up his car when he heard someone whisper to him like, hey, look over here, something along those lines. And when he looked, that's when he saw a terrifying apparition of some kind. It was there, it was described as a man with like a bald head, grinning, whatever this case, ear to ear type grin. He also had a checkered shirt. It was quite bizarre. Like, and this thing, whatever it was, told him almost telepathically. He's stating that he didn't quite see the mouth move, but at the same time he still heard it being told to him. It said take his patrol car towards a certain area and that you'll have a cloud levitate you to another spacecraft. And the way he was being told this information, it was compelling him to do it. He had no choice. Like, this thing completely took his mind over, and then was able to get him to go one more time back on a spacecraft and then try to visit, try to work with, I guess, these aliens yet again. So multiple encounters with these aliens, multiple abductions, in several cases eyewitnesses too, with some of these lights, and the patrolmen also witnessing the lights as well. Government investigation in there too. So again, lots and lots of info that to share for it. One last thing too to point out. He was apparently given by these aliens a weird device, something that was, the way he described it was a sphere that had an electrically charged pyramid inside. It was almost like a gift from these aliens, and they stated that if he took this gift, it would enable him to share it with others, and then that way human beings could comprehend who they were and how they live based off of this gift. As unique as this gift sounds, you would think like it would be something really cool, really good to share with humanity. For whatever reason, this guy Zanfretta decided that he took the gift, but he buried it somewhere. Like, I don't know if he buried it just somewhere that he would not remember himself, or maybe he does know where it's at, but is not going to share with anybody. For whatever reason, he decided not to share it with anyone, even under the instructions of the aliens, to give to some researcher named Dr. J. Allen Hynek. So for whatever reason, this guy Zanfretta hid the object. He stated it's somewhere near the hills near Genoa, I guess, presumably somewhere there in Italy, but he's not claiming or stating where it's located specifically. Maybe it's too much power, who knows. He just doesn't want it to have it in anyone else's hands. But yes, lots of info to share with this abduction case. Again, considered the most famous alien UFO abduction / encounter within Italy. If anyone has any more info, long-winded info, clearly with this video, and again I was doubting about putting it into 2 videos, but in this case I thought I've covered the most important points. But if anyone has anything else that stands out that they wanted to share, please post those comments below. That'd be great to hear some. Alright everybody, thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.